Hi everyone, it's Dave. I am back with another podcast. It's Legends of the Spire. This is the podcast that talks to the former players and managers of Chesterfield FC, and I am finally back after a little break with a new podcast with Adie Shaw. Now, Adie had some formative years at Nottingham Forest under Brian Clough, met some good friends there, including Paul Hart, former Chesterfield manager, and that's how he ended up being at Chesterfield for a couple of seasons from 1988 to 1990. In that time, we got relegated, but then did have a playoff final where we narrowly lost to Cambridge. And unfortunately, after that, he had to retire early in his kind of early mid-20s. And instead of leaving the club, actually spearheaded the new community side of the football club. So was involved in loads of youth coaching, loads of the community things that go around the town, and also in the women's game as well, where we had a chat and mentioned former guest Jane Haslam. He's now works for the EFL, where he's been for years and years and years. But we had a good chat, firstly about his playing career, but then also his time at Chesterfield after that, including all of the community work he did, and also working alongside John Duncan and Kevin Randall. Some good FA Cup 97 memories in there too. If you haven't seen already, I do have the latest issue of the fanzine that's come out. It's now been renamed to Legends of the Spire instead of Linda's Sandwich Shop. So issue number 5 is out now. Link is in the thing at the bottom. Please buy a copy if you can, and if you want to contribute to a further issue, then just get in touch. You can write about absolutely anything, send in photos, drawings, whatever it is, get in touch. But without further ado, let's crack on with the podcast, because it has been a little while. Here we are with the latest episode, a guy who I have a huge respect for and really enjoyed having on the podcast. It is Adie Shaw. Here we go. How did it all kind of start for you then? Because obviously you're Merton, is it Merton?
Yeah.
County Durham.
Yeah, up in near Merton, near just outside of Durham, in between Durham and Sunderland. And basically just started as like everybody else does, school teams, started playing football at a young age. I had an older brother, my brother's Graham, who was 4 years older, so I was brought up where joined in with them straight away at 6, 7, 8 year old and being pushed around. But you know, when I look back, it taught us so much about probably the way I ended up becoming a professional footballer. You know, basically hard work and graft and being a strong tackler and win. You know, be very competitive in what I did. You know, and I've taken probably that to all my life. Really, I'm very competitive at most things, and I want to win still. You know, at everything. You know, so everything I actually do, I still want to win. You know what I mean, which is good. But yeah, so and then I ended up, obviously the first real games I went to was my local team was Sunderland. So I think I think I went with my brother for the first time, which was nearly a bus. We used to have to get a bus, which was about half an hour, and then walk from the bus station to Old Roker Park at the time, which is about half a mile down the road. And I think the first time I can remember was being on in the Fulwell end, which was the end, which had a cover on, at 8-year-old, and my brother used to go at the back with all the big boys, and I was at the front with all, and it was great when you look back, and you know, I know the stadiums have much improved over the years, but I started in one corner and finished it in the other corner, you know, without my feet touching the ground. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was really the start of where I started really in the bug quarters, really. You know what I mean? And it's never changed. You know, and I think you look back and you think, well, you know, is there any games that you can really remember? I remember watching obviously the '73 Cup final. But the one game I can remember, I think West Ham. I can't remember what year it was. West Ham had just won the cup, the FA Cup, and on the Saturday they played Sunderland on the Tuesday. And you know, I always remember going to that game, and the atmosphere outside the stadium was terrific. And it was Trevor Brookham was playing, and people, you know, that era, and it was brilliant. And I think that's the time when it really caught us, and I got hooked on it on big time. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was. So it's like everything else. Most people, they get brought up within school. It was a footballing area, the northeast. You know, everybody. You know, you finished school and basically you went outside for 3 hours without having any tea, and then you came in and got your tea. Yeah. You know, and you know, it's my mum and dad used to always say, the Hardleys ever saw us. And then when it was half term or holiday period, you were always out and about. So it was that's and out and about, basically playing football against a different street. So it could be like 5 versus 5, or it could be 22 versus 32. It was that sort of, which again in them eras the roads weren't as busy as they are, because we put the goalposts were your jumpers and
the road, yeah.
things like that. But I was very fortunate. I probably dictated it all when I was a young kid, because I think it was my mum and dad my dad was a baker, coal miner, and so we didn't have a great deal of money. But I was always able, through grandparents, I had the football, I had the ball. When it came to the cricket season, I had the cricket bat and the ball. When it came to Wimbledon, I had the tennis racket. So everybody seemed to come around where I was. You know what I mean? Which good memories. You look back and you think, yeah, good memories.
So you got picked up by obviously a big club in Forest.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting time, because obviously I've spoken to Bryn Gunn and Calvin Plummer, who were obviously around there at the time, and Paul Hart will have been around there at the time. So I'm guessing this is where later on, when you come to Chesterfield, that kind of connection from when you started there in the early 80s probably comes through.
It does, yeah, without doubt. Obviously, I used to, when I first went to Forest, as they did then, everybody had certain players that had to look after. And my main four was Han van Brooklyn, Peter Shilton, Viv Anderson, Ian Boyer, and then it was Ian Wallace. And then basically, I think I had Paul Hart for about 3 or 4 months, and then Paul left, to be fair. But yeah, so that was the link. And when I was a young lad, obviously, Bryn Gunn was a regular first team player by then, and Calvin was, so that I think that when I moved up to Chesterfield, that was the link. You know what I mean? I knew Paul Hart anyway from obviously being at Forest together. But I think I was very fortunate in my time there, David, that I'd gone at the right time at Forest, where they just won the 2 European Cups. They went all over the world, Forest, just playing games, really, you know what I mean? Yeah. And the youth team went on to that. They got part of that. And it's, when I say part of it, they would get invited to sort of Barcelona, the first team, would play a tournament against, Barcelona, Nottingham Forest, AC Milan, and then a week later, the youth team would mirror that. So when I was like 16, I first went to Forest. I'd never been abroad. By the time I was probably 18, 19, I'd been to, I think it was about 20 odd different countries, but not seeing them, because what we did, we flew in, played the game, and flew out. Yeah. So when you say, well, what's that city like? And that, don't know really, because we just flew in and flew out. But it was a really exciting time. And obviously we had a manager at the time as well who was, I still believe he was outstanding. He was an outstanding man. And I do a lot of work now within the clubs, as you know, and it's and people talk about psychology and all that. Cloughie was doing that when he, in 1980, 81, 82, 83. And the things that he was doing then was, people say this, it's all new. No, it wasn't. Good managers at the time were doing it anyway. When people talk about, oh, this guy's a good manager, and Terry Venable was just passed away, who was probably one of the best coaches I saw. But when you speak to people, and I wasn't in his company hardly ever. I saw him a couple of sessions where he did for the FA at the time. But just reading some of the articles today, what he was good was a man manager. He knew you got 11 players, everybody's an individual. What makes that individual tick? And I think the best managers and the best coaches suss that out early doors.
Well, you've got to be a leader, haven't you, as opposed to a manager, haven't you?
Yeah, but the times at Forest, we didn't have any superstars. We had good players, and then he actually bought, when I was there, he bought people like Justin Fashanu and Trevor Francis for £1 million. Well, Justin came for £1 million. And then I think we one of the stories was Gary Mexon. We bought Gary Mexon, and Cloughie didn't play him, because Gary Mexon had bought a brand new car, I think, and Cloughie didn't like that, so he didn't play him. Justin Fashanu came, and because Justin at the time, again, probably in front of the game, he had his own personal masseur, and Cloughie didn't like that. So, without getting into too much detail, Cloughie banned him from the training ground. You know what I mean? And it's, you know, and you try to think of things like that now. One of the top managers doing that, which one or two at Man United have done that in the last, with not mentioning names. They've let them go like that. You know what I mean? And it's but like I say, Cloughie did that in the early days, you know, I think what I was speaking to a coach a few days ago, and we were talking about again a lad who was at Forest with me, and we both said, you know, what we learned is 16, 17, 18-year-olds, the discipline, not just the discipline being a footballer, the discipline what we were taught and brought up with at Forest is stayed with us. You know, that was 17, you know, I'm talking about 50 years ago now, nearly. You know, that it's the same principles, the same discipline is still in me, what I learned from Cloughie then.
Yeah.
You know, and it's you know, I've got nothing but praise for the club at that time. It was terrific. You know, and it's great to see Coops now down there. You know, got them back into the Premier League, and that's where they should be. You know what I mean? Because it's
well, they're kind of a proper football club, aren't they?
And, it is.
And that's kind of, you know
I think what a lot of people forget, Cloughie took when he went there with Peter Taylor. You know, that I think just in the old second division, I think they were. You know what I mean? So it was like, and to bring them up, and then within sort of a few years to become sort of European champions, not just once but twice. You know what I mean? It is you know, that won't be done now. You know what I mean? The way it is with the size of the club and things like that. And we don't forget, in them days it was a knockout competition from day one. It wasn't a league basis where you played 4, 5, 6 games. It was a do or die straight away, which probably helped Forest in the time. Really, you know, there was a home and away leg, and that was it. You know, but yeah, we like to say we had, but the discipline and everything came from the gaffer downwards, and from the players, everybody mingled in together. You know, and you talk about it was a close knit family with good players, but there was no big heads. There was no, and if you were a big head, there was only one big head, wasn't there? And that was the gaffer. So and if you got above that, you weren't there long. You know,
exactly. Yeah. So what kind of, how would you describe yourself as a player then, back then?
Very honest. I've always said, you know, you get what you see. You know, I was a hard worker. I was a ball winner. I was a tackler. You know, out of probably me, I think I played about 150 league games. I played the majority at centre half. You know what I mean? So I was always not the biggest 5'10", but I was always decent in the air. You know, but I was more of a ball winner, and I could, you know, I wasn't quick. That was probably one of my downfalls, which even in them days you needed it. But I always thought my brain was a little bit quick. I knew where things were, and I was a decent passer. But I knew where my level would be. You know, I went on loan up to Halifax when I was at Forest, and found that difficult to start with, because at Forest we were even with Cloughie, we were a passing team. You know, we didn't get fined, but people used to say if you pass the ball over 15 yards, you got fined. You know, so it had to be short, sharp, and probably like the modern footballers do now. But we ended up, you know, going up to Halifax at the time we were on loan, taught us a great deal about football in general. But it was a total different environment. You know, it was a different environment where, even though we had a guy called Mick Jones, who was one of the coaches at Forest with me, and that's why I moved up there. It was the old fourth division was a tough league, but very little football played. So when you're a midfield player and you hardly got a kick of the ball, you know what I mean? So it was difficult, and it's but no, it was that was my time up there.
Yeah, and you did end up then. So that was like 84, I think, wasn't it? You kind of went on loan, and then
84, I went.
And then you end up signing permanently, didn't you?
I did. I went up there 84, and I was, unfortunately, my father had just passed away, so I didn't really have that personal contact to say, Dad, look, you know, I've been on loan. I've done really well. I'm going back to Forest. I got offered another 2-year contract to go back to Forest. But what happened was I missed the buzz of playing on a Saturday, you know, because I ended up, you know, which I think it's happened to quite a few lads, to be fair, where I'd gone up there, played at Halifax, been up there 3 months, and about 2 weeks before my loan finished, I got off. Mick Jones called us in and said, look, he goes, the gaffer wants you back. This is Thursday morning. He said, and I think you're going to make your debut for the first team, because he goes, you've done quite well in the chat we've had. And I've gone, all right. So I phoned, you know, I phoned my dad and said, look, can you get time off work, blah, blah, blah. And went back to Forest, and every Friday morning the team sheet would go up on the dressing room walls, or just outside. There was a little room, so you had the youth team, then the reserves, and the first team. So I've gone to sort of the youth team, not in the youth team. Obviously, I just played 20 games at Halifax, so I didn't expect. I thought I was a little bit better than the youth team at the time. And then I went to the reserves, not in there. I thought, cracking here, I've got a chance going down to Southampton. My name wasn't on any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm there at the corner. I'm looking at the corner of my eye, and the gaffer's watching me looking at the team sheets. And he's turned to me. He said, "All right, come to me. I can't do the accent now, but he's come to me office." And he virtually said, "Look, there's only one big head at this club. I've heard you've done so well up there, but there's still only one big head, and that's me. I want you to come. The under-15s are playing on a Sunday morning. I want you to come and play for them." So I'd actually played a league game on the Tuesday night. Went back to Forest on the Thursday, expecting to make my debut at Southampton, and I played 20 minutes in an under-15 game. And then and to be fair to the gaffer, he was there. And then I got a call after about 15 minutes. Yeah, right, Ginger, off you go home, see you tomorrow. And that was it. You know what I mean? It's and I'm there's one or two I know. Mark Crosley goes around the circuit now, and there's a few lads doing the circuit, and they tell stories similar to that. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
He just brought you down to earth. And he, I can't speak highly about him really in that regards. And you look back again, and I signed my first pro contract at 17, and it was in the reserves, and it was against Everton. There was a little guy called Johnny Morris, who was, only a young lad as well, and he tore us apart. He tore us apart about 2 minutes before the end. I think it was 0-0, and I've tried to shield the ball to go out to player, and he's just put his foot around, brought it in, and they scored 1-0. Walked in, got a right good old telling off from the coach and staff at the time. Got a phone call, and it's 9 o'clock the following morning. The gaffer wants to see us, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go, flipping hell, because I was coming, and he just said, right, seen enough, just sign that contract. So he goes, and I start reading it. He said, no, don't read it, you sign it. And that was it. So what do? You sign it.
Yeah.
You know what I was signing for, but it was all right, So it was. He picked you up when you needed to be picked up, but he knocked you down when you thought you.
Yeah.
How do you react though when someone, from your playing staff comes in and says, "Boss, I think you're doing this wrongly"?
Good. Well, I ask him which way he thinks it should be done. We get down to it, and then we talk about it for 20 minutes, and then we decide I was right.
So you ended up then, so like you say, underdog games for Halifax. I used to work in Halifax, nice town. And then you end up coming to Chesterfield in, 1988. You'd had like a little bit of, what happened in between Halifax and then coming to Chesterfield?
Well, I left Halifax, and then I actually went to Bridlington Town. I moved to Bridlington Town. There was a manager there called Colin Appleton, used to be manager at Hull City. And he just called us up one day, and he just said, Eddie, he goes, and it was within a couple of days of being released at Halifax. And he said, look, he goes, I've just spoke to the manager at Halifax, Billy. He goes, I understand financially the club can't. I was probably one of the bigger peers at Halifax at the time, couldn't afford to keep us and things like that. He said, do you want to come and just train and play for us? And so I went with him, and I ended up, and he said, look, we'll give you, and I think I was on 250 quid, some of that. He said, we'll give you exactly what you had in Halifax. And I said, brilliant. So I played on the Saturday, and then we had a game on the Tuesday, and I got another 250 quid. And I've gone, what's this? And he said, well, 250 quid. I said, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I was on 250 quid a week. I'm getting 250 quid a game at Bridlington. You know what I mean? And it's and it was the chairman Richardson. Can you remember the lad who went to Doncaster? And I think the stand didn't last long when I think he was in charge of it. I think the stand burned down. And I think for dodgy reasons, I think in that time. But yeah, so I went to Bridlington, then I went to York City. There was a guy called Alan Little. Alan Little, who was Brian Little's. He was there, and then Derek Fazzali. He was there. So I went to York and played. Just on loan, like I say, it was just in between sort of trying to get a club, and played about 4 or 5 games, I think, for York, but the same scenario came like it is now. We've got a squad. We can't afford to take your own, So I had about 6 months where I was just going from Bridlington to York, and then and that was it. So and it worked out quite well. But and then I got the opportunity to got a phone call from Paul Hart, and just said, "Look, what you're up to." I told him I was at York. He said, "Well, that's what I'm asking," because he goes, "I've seen you, or one of me scouts have seen you at York, and you're playing, and blah blah." And and then my knees were starting to go. I mean, they weren't terrific, to be fair. And he said, "How's your knees?" I said, "Well, they're all right." Yeah, because I'm after a job. So I ended up coming to Chesterfield, and I actually played, and it happened ever so quick, really, at Chesterfield. It was one of these where I think that I got the phone call on the Monday. I came, he said, "Look," he goes, "I need to see you in a game." He goes, "And the owner wants to see you in a game." That we had like Norton Lee at the time, to see that you're fit and your knees are all right and everything else. And he said, "We're not going to do medical," because he goes, "We know that wouldn't happen," And I said, "Fair enough." So I came in, and we played against. We didn't even play against a normal team. In fact, it was just a mixture of people. You know what I mean? And it was one of those games where everything I did came off. You know what I mean? So that was on the that was on the Wednesday, I think it was. And then he phoned us up and said, "Well, we'll go and offer you a contract." I said, "Okay." So and that's how it started. And I think the first game for Chesterfield was probably a week later, and we played. It was Boxing Day. We played, I think, the Huddersfield in the league. I think it was Huddersfield in the league. So that was it. So we played Huddersfield on the Saturday, and then with it being the Christmas period, we went to Sheffield United. I think on the 28th. So then were the first two games, which the Sheffield United one was an interesting one because it's just meeting the new players there, and at the time, there was like people like Kevin Arnott and Robert Lane and Bob Bloom, who was there, Andy Morris. Bob and Andy was like myself, were still only young lads at the time, and like I say, we went to Sheffield United, and as you do, your team coach and got on there, and we actually won the game. They were top, we were bottom. We actually won the game, and probably Bob Bloomer might have mentioned this to you before.
He did, yeah.
Bob's
but it'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah, Bob's a Sheffield Wednesday supporter, and so anyway, the game. I think we won 2-1. To be fair, I think we beat them 2-1. So at the end of the game, I've just got like you do to the Chesterfield fans, you probe them, and I'm walking off into the dressing room. So I'm in the dressing room for about 10 minutes, and I'm thinking, where is everybody? There's not one person came in the dressing room. And I'm talking about Paul Hart, Chris McMenemy, Dave Rushbury, the physio, none of the staff. I'm thinking, well, where the hell's everybody at? So I've actually gone out, looked at the dressing room door to make sure it was the right dressing room, and I'm thinking, well, it is because we closed it here and things like that. So I've actually gone back out on the pitch and been at the tunnel area, and I just looked up, and when they had fences at the time still at grounds, and Bob Bloom was on the fence giving it, celebrating, and I'm thinking, what club have I come to here? We're bottom of the league and we celebrate like we've won the FA Cup or something. And it was, but again, that was the passion of the lads, and I think that's what Paul Hart and Chris McMurray certainly instilled into that group of players at the time.
But this is Chesterfield's first corner of the match. Ely. And it's a goal, it's Morris, putting Chesterfield in front by 3-1.
Again, we didn't have big superstars at the time. I think Paul Hart took over, and he knew he needed to get rid of one or two players, and because I think we had a chairman at the time, Norton Lee, who was always very careful with how much money we were spending and things like that.
A few players have said, cut the bars of soap in half. And
exactly, that's it. So it was, I think they were run on a really tight budget, so I think, I think if Paul Hart was given his head at the time, and Chris McMenemy when he took over, I think, we would have we might have just stayed up. You don't know, do you? It's ifs and buts. But yeah, that was my first couple of games thinking, wow, what club have I come to here?
Well, yeah, it's interesting as well, because obviously, like you mentioned, so your debut was Boxing Day 1988, that 1-1 draw at Huddersfield, with Huddersfield, and then we won the next 4 games, didn't we? So I think
We
it was
did.
Fulham, Sheffield United, Wigan, Bristol City.
It
I
was,
think
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
It must be difficult coming into a team that's bottom, but it
Yeah.
obviously started off quite well for you.
Yeah. We started like say I think that period we all believed the one thing when I walked into the dressing room, it felt like a club who wasn't bottom. You know what I mean? There was quite a few young lads, like I've mentioned one or two of them there, but we had one or two of the older heads as well, with the Kevin Arnotts, because again, Kevin Arnott, when I was a Sunderland fan, he was one of my idols when I was growing up, to be fair. So it was like playing alongside my idol at one stage. But it was people, we didn't have any sort of any thoughts of what we were doing. We just got on with the job in hand. There were a bunch of young lads, young players who just said, well, let's go for it and see what happens. And we went on that run. But like I said, I think after the 4 victories, I think one or two picked up a few injuries. And then, before because I think at the time we only had a squad of 15, 16 players. You get a few injuries and you're really there down to the bare bones. And I think it was Kevin Arnott probably who, if I can remember, Kevin Arnott was one of the players who got injured. And then, so that the 4 wins on the trot obviously became probably a couple of draws and a couple of losses after that, and then you're fighting up against it, because I think the 4 wins just got us in touching distance of everybody else.
Yeah.
I think when I went there, we were probably 12 points away from the team above us. Never mind to try and keep safe, and what that 4 wins did, it brought us back in the pack, but still 4 or 5 points behind being safe. You know what I mean? And so it was difficult, and then obviously, picking up a few injuries, it became really hard, and it was a bit of a slog till the end of the season after that. You know what I mean? Because we were, Paul Hart, like I say, Paul Hart and Chris were terrific. They weren't putting any pressure on us, but I think as players, we started to put pressure on ourselves, as in we need to win. And then if you go 1-0 down, it become even harder. And I think because we were a young squad, I don't think we really knew how to handle that. And it's but yeah, so it was a tough sort of run in. Then obviously we got relegated that season, and it was then I think it gave Paul Hart an opportunity to get rid of a few of the lads who were out of contract, and then he brought in a few players. I think, like you say, people like the Bring Guns and Calvin Plumbers and people like that, who a little bit more experienced, which was again with the connection at Forest, with Paul Hart, that worked quite well. I think I signed the same time as Tony Bryan did. Tony was a terrific lad, terrific. The lads will have told you in the past, terrific lad. I think you've had Tony on anyway.
Yeah, I've had Tony on. Right, yeah.
Fantastic player, but great lad as well. You know what I mean? And it's I think he was bought for about 125 grand a day before I came for nothing. You know what I mean? He was, you wouldn't know. Again, Tony was one of the lads who, he worked damned hard. But so I think that time Paul Hart was able to bring a few players in, which he did, and and it was, but we all knew it was going to be again a long hard season. And then. And then I think halfway through the season, I think I got injured again, and I think he brought in Sean Dyche. Dyche came to the club, and we again, we all know Sean as the manager now, but he was a terrific player as well, and I was always surprised that he didn't. I know he did go to some decent clubs, but I thought he would have went higher than where he did, because he was really a good, typical leader. What you saw with Dyche, you got. He was a leader for 17, 18, 19-year-old. You know what I mean? And it's and a good lad with it. And that's, I keep mentioning that, don't I? Because at the time at Chesterfield, we did have good people, and people who basically had the club at heart, and we all grafted together. But unfortunately, it didn't work out the way probably Paul Hart wanted, or even myself, because midway through that season, or at the end of the season, I virtually had to retire then through my knees just giving way. I remember went to Doncaster, got a bad, went in for a tackle, and to be fair, I went to win the ball, but just slightly go over the top of the ball. But unfortunately, the player, he knew I was coming in, and he went a little bit higher, and my knee just buckled, and that was the end of it, really. I did come back, and I started realising, because every time I got injured after that, it wasn't a case of 2 weeks. It ended up being like a month and a half, and it was starting to get to us. But and then I got myself back fit just before the end of the season when we got the playoffs.
I was going to say, because you missed a period, didn't you? But then you were the substitute, weren't you, against
I was
Stockport and Cambridge.
Cambridge. That's it. I ended up, like I say, got myself really fit, or tried to get myself as fit as I could, and got myself in a position where I think I'd had about 4 or 5 reserve team games, so I knew I was all right, and just timed it slightly wrong, but slightly right, because it gave us an opportunity to do every boyhood's dream. And I didn't play at Wembley because I was substitute, but I walked out, and I always say to people, I ended up before in the warm up. Chris McMenemy said to us, he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Chris, I'm at Wembley." I said, "I'm taking this ball. I'm going to take a penalty in that goal and a penalty in that goal. So when I'm older, people say, 'Have you scored at Wembley?' I can say, 'Yes, I've scored twice. One of that goal and one of that goal.'" So it worked out quite well. And but yeah, it was disappointing to the end of the season, because I think we should have gone up. We should have gone up, and it was one of these when we got to the Wembley as well. What I can gather from the powers that be, we ended up. Obviously, we had a contract with the club saying that if we won promotion, we'd get this, we'd get that. We didn't have anything in the contract to see if we got beat. So we actually went to Wembley and came away with not even a 50 quid bonus. But if we'd won it, if we beat Cambridge, I think Norton was going to fly us all off to Barbados and things like that. Which, to be fair to Norton, I think he did a few years later. When they did get promotion, he took the lads over to Barbados and things like that. But yeah, it was just a sad time, because I think at the time we had a group of players and good management staff who again had the club at heart. And it's like I say, one game. But personally for me, it was, I came back and got myself into a position where I could be on the bench for both, because at the time there was only 2 subs. It wasn't like they have now where there's 5. There was 2 subs, and I think at Wembley, I think me and Dave Waller were the subs, to be fair, at the time. I think Wall came on with about 10, 15 minutes to go, and that's where it's like everything else, you keep warming up. I'm ready, Gaffer. But I didn't get on, but it was a great experience.
I was having a look on like the forums and things in the lead up to this, just seeing searching your name and things like that, and seeing what people were saying. And there was quite a few people that were saying that kind of the loss of you and Keith Arnott was quite it was quite pivotal in that, they think that it probably wouldn't have needed a playoffs if we'd have managed to keep a few players fit. Is it?
That was the case. I think we just had bad injuries at the wrong time, and there weren't sort of little niggles. There were probably 2 or 3 week injuries, which I think with Paul Hart and Chris Mack, they probably had to change the team quite regular. And I think at the time when we had our decent runs, there was a good balance. There was me and Bob Bloomer, and even Jamie Hewitt came and started playing in midfield with us, and Kevin Arnott, and we were all fine, but we never really had that settled team in the end. But yeah, it was just disappointing, because I think that season I always believed we deserved to go up. And it's but that's what happens. It kicks you in the teeth sometimes, this game.
Yeah. Deserved to go up just from the Stockport.
Yeah, well, that's it, exactly.
They've had to play a final after that.
Exactly, that's it. The first game, was it 4-1, 4-0, 4-1? I think.
Yeah,
4-0. Yeah. And so going to Stockport, we were really confident. But still in the back of your mind, you thought, right, come on, let's not concede early doors. What I mean? So I think the first sort of 20 minutes, we did it in sections, really. Let's get through the first 10 minutes, then get through the 20 minutes, then get through 30. And then you think to yourself, right, we're all right. And then I think we scored, which then really, eased it off a bit. But it was an enjoyable journey coming back, shall we say, from Stockport that night.
There was always a sense that after their 4-0 win on Sunday, all Chesterfield had to do was turn up to qualify for Wembley. And after Bryn Gunn survived what looked like a blatant handball, it was clear Lady Luck was with them. When the luck looked like running out, Mick Leonard was equal to Stockport's best. But if anyone was going to score, it was perhaps inevitably Calvin Plummer, who plundered a hat-trick on Sunday. But credit for this goal to John Ryan, who robs Brown, and Plummer makes life look easy. Now, there's never a bad time to score a goal, but if you've been waiting 5 years, a strike on target must be like manna from heaven. So imagine John Chidoz's relief as he breaks what must have been one of the longest barren spells ever for a striker.
We're fortunate. I was fortunate both as a player, but even when I went on the coaching side, it's I think about obviously the playoff final, but then I think about the Liverpool game. The Liverpool game that we had in the Middlesbrough game. For a club like Chesterfield, and we all talk about, and we still talk about it. It should have been us at Wembley that year. And I've never seen Ellery since. And I would have thought the job I do now, I might have seen him somewhere around it about, but I haven't. But that's how it is. You just move on, but you just wonder, it wouldn't have changed my sort of life, because I'd already retired and moved on to the coaching side, and wasn't really part of the first team coaching side. I was doing more of the Middlesbrough game. I was doing more of the scouting for John and Kev Randall at the time, just going again just before we played Middlesbrough in the first game, going up to watch Middlesbrough to see how they played, and I always remember coming back, and John said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, there's a little lad called Janino. If you stop him, we might be able to keep the score down a bit." Because I think they played the week on that Saturday, and they were terrific. And and then I think John decided to put Mark Jules
up steps, Mark Jules, yeah.
Because I remember being in the room, because the Middlesbrough game was like a 12:30 kickoff, so I actually got back into Chesterfield by the time the first team game had finished, and we'd gone into John's office. And to be fair to John and Kevin, they were terrific, because they were, as soon as one game finished, they were in the office for hours on end. And tactics board was up. What do you think of this? And they had every detail that they needed. So if something happened here, what happened here? Something happened there, what happened there? To the point that I think at one stage, I think Tony Loma was playing midfield for a few games and things like it's. But he was. Both of them were terrific, and we were. I remember being in that office, and I can't remember who the first team we played at home, to be fair, that day. But we're in there till about 7:30, 7:15, just talking who can do and stop Janino. And we'll pull you were pulling players, and we think, nah, not mobile enough, not quick enough, nah. And then obviously it was. We all said, well, what about Julesy? Which I don't think John was daft enough to realise that we could go and play Middlesbrough man to man and win. But we had to stop their sources. We did, and I think we did for the majority of the game. You know what I mean? And again, the boys were terrific. They were absolutely brilliant, and they deserved all the praises they got in the line-out, and it put them into the public eye, didn't it? Everybody, Sean Dyche became, there was Billy Mercer, Paul Holland, they all got decent moves after that, and some of the lads, Jamie stayed, but even Jamie went and then come back, but some of the lads have they've done well out of it, and it's when I say done well out of it, it's pride. Not the money side, it's the pride, and it's the memories, And I think when Chesterfield were at home the other day in the cup, I think Jamie and Kevin Davis mentioned it. You know what I mean? So it's still in their minds. It'll probably still hurt them because they were actually on the pitch themselves.
Oh yeah, anyone I've spoken to, I remember speaking to. I think it was Andy Morris when they'd gone away on holiday and the FA Cup final came on TV. And he said they all just walked out of the bar because it was just
exactly.
And it was interesting talking to John when I spoke to John Duncan about it. He said the one kind of regret he almost had was that when we equalised, he said they shouted for them to tighten up, and he said they should have done the opposite and said they should have gone gung ho and tried to win it.
Because I think at the time Middlesbrough were on the racks. You know what I mean? And it's because it was like one of them. I think when you've got a team like Middlesbrough, the squad they had, when it's ridiculous when you look at the team. You actually looked at the team sheet and you think, wow, you know what I mean? But and so most of the time you only get one chance against teams like that. And the replay, everybody thought, oh, we did it, a few days ago, we'll do it again. But it was always going to be a hard task for our players, to recover from that emotions and how the game panned out. Yeah. The Liverpool game, I see some people, in town sometimes and come up to us and say, I was at Anfield that night, you know what I mean? And it was terrific. And, again, the story. Chris McManamy was the manager then, and he'd invited us to go along with himself, not just for that game, for that season really, and sit on the bench because he knew I wanted to be to basically get a little bit higher in the coaching side, and I wanted to become a manager and things like that. And Chris was terrific for me because he said, "Well, why don't you come to the games with us? Do the youth team and do what you need to do, but if you can, come to the games, sit on the bench and see how it works." And I always remember. Sorry, I'm laughing because I always remember. Most of the time it was great, a normal game, and then we were on the bench at Anfield. We went 3-0 up, and myself, Dave Rushby, Steve Heskey, who was on the bench there, who was with Chris. And Chris just looked at us and he just said, "Adie, will you do us a favour?" I said, "What?" He said, "Can you just hit us as hard as you can?" And I've got, "What are you on about, Gaffer?" He said, "Will you," he swore a little bit, but I can't swear here. He said, "Will you just hit me with your left hook as hard as you can?" And I've gone, "Yeah." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because I must be dreaming." He goes, "I'm in charge of a football club at Anfield and we're 3-0 up. And then the rest's history, isn't it?" But again,
a few players mentioned that at half time, everyone kind of came in and sat down in the dressing room, and that it was just kind of silence for about 5 minutes because no one really knew what to say.
Didn't want to say it was like that. It was, again, I was just the observer. I wasn't part of the coaching staff at all. With the first team, I was the youth coach at the time, but so I was in the background really, but. It was like that. It was one of those feelings where you'd walked in and you were 4-0 down, and everybody was like stunned, and it's, but again, fantastic time for the club, fantastic time for the players, and like I say, it's and people still talk about it, and that's what football does. We always criticise, we always look at the negatives sometimes, not just in football but in life. Let's think about the positives. And, I always say, think about the positives. Will be the society and players and everybody else will be better for it. And that's always been my motto. Always be positive anywhere and whatever you do. If you get knocked down, get on your back again, get on and get up and do it, and get knocked down again.
Did that kind of help you then? Because obviously, like at the end of that 1990 season, a couple of years at Chesterfield, you've had obviously a relegation and then a nearly promotion in 2 years, and then it all kind of stops for you, and you have to retire, and you're kind of early to mid-20s, and then kind of start on this other journey. And it's great that the club was there to kind of help you out and trying to give you a foot into that. But it must have been hard, that transition of switching through.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, David, it probably was, but it wasn't, because I always wanted to be a coach. I always felt like I enjoyed coaching, and it's so. But I retired on the Saturday. I'd seen the surgeon, and he told us, by the time if I don't stop by the time I'm 40, I'll be in a wheelchair. That's how he put it to us. And so I ended up. I think that was on the Friday, and then on the Monday. Chris called us in, and it was Paul Hart, to be fair, not Chris McManamy, and just said, "Look, we're thinking about starting a community scheme. Do you want to be a part of it?" So I said, "What's it entail?" And it was, it was what it was, going into schools, coaching the kids, starting Saturday morning clubs up, and then it was sort of old age pensions, tea dances. So the footballing side was great, but I couldn't cope with birthday parties and things like that. But it gives us a fantastic grounding into the coaching environment, which is put us in good stead for the rest of my career, really, because I've always said one of my strengths as a coach, I was able to deal with obviously international players at one level, and then also I was able to deal with a 7-year-old because I would come down to their level. Which again, some players and some coaches can't do that. They can only coach the men. They can't come down to the youth level or even lower down. And it's so it gives us a right good grounding, to be fair, on that. And we still, we had good support, because we had people like Paddy Carroll, Kev Hornsby, who was Kev was Chesterfield mouse, and Kev and had good staff, really. And these staff were people who had been basically, the pits had cooled those. They didn't have a job, so they came here And if it wasn't for them, it's we wouldn't have gotten it up as running as what we did, because it was those guys who, I was the figurehead, but it was them guys who went out into the schools every day, and I if anybody's listening, I apologise if I can't remember everybody's name, but I had about 10, 15 staff, and they'll know who it was over a period of 2 years, who were fantastic, looked after the school parties and this and that and everything else. And I'd come in near the end and just present with his birthday cake or something, and it's, but again, like I say, it was a good grounding for me in the coaching side, that I learned how to be able to coach young players, because they are different, and they still are now. They still are now. How you coach an 8, 9-year-old is different to how you coach a first team player. As simple as.
Rodgers looking for Morris, and Morris has made it a chance, and there's Norris. He scored for Chesterfield. 6 minutes gone, and Liverpool have been beaten by Chesterfield's first strike on goal. A typical Chesterfield move, in which Rodgers picks out Andy Morris, the big man. He outleaped the England defender, and at close quarters there was Steve Norris to poke it home. Chesterfield leading here at Anfield. Liverpool 0, Chesterfield 1, 6 minutes gone.
You've been mentioned on a few podcasts in the past, but Bob Bloomer mentioned you, obviously from that.
He wouldn't have said anything nice, Bob, would he?
and also Jane Haslam, who was then Jane Ebbage. I spoke to her about kind of starting women's football in Chesterfield, and she spoke about you in very glowing terms about the importance of having someone who had been a professional footballer and was kind of a professional coach, kind of starting the women's game in Chesterfield at a time when, it's not like it is now by any stretch of the imagination. No. So that was kind of a huge thing that you were part of, wasn't it?
It was. And again, I can't take any compliment or any praise, because what Jane Ebbage did at the time, she was absolutely magnificent. I'm trying to think of the guy who was alongside her, like called Wild, I think. I can't remember his first name. Who basically they did all the hard ground. Again, like I said, I was the figurehead who came in and coached and started coaching and basically supplied them with balls, bibs and cones. That was part of it. And but it's nice of Jen to say that, and I really appreciate that. But it was at the time something new. Nobody had done it. What women playing football, it was unknown. You know what I mean? And it was Jane had this. She could see in the future where she knew, because she was passionate about it, and she, some of the things and some of the pictures and some of the kit that they had to wear at the time and things like that was virtually disgraceful, really, when they were representing our club, Chesterfield. But to be fair, I was there, and we did some sessions and and being part of talks and things like that, and tried to help them out as much as I can, and that's. But again, I keep saying that's what we do at Chesterfield. I think we are people, and we were from when I was at the club to now. I think people work together. You go to the ground now, you've got lads down there working in the ground who've been there for 50 years. They're still there now doing the same job as when I was playing. It was the same people. What I mean? So that tells you something about it. I know people will have moved on, but there's quite a good nucleus of people who've stayed at the club and supported the club. And I've always believed, again here, it's always been a good community club.
You then ended up your first team coach at York, for a bit, and they had a bit of a cup run as well, wasn't there? You mentioned like the Middlesbrough kind of Chesterfield cup run and stuff. There was the game against Fulham, wasn't there? Jean Tigana's Fulham.
It was, it was at the time. To be fair, it was. It was. I left Chesterfield and I went to York as youth team coach to start with. And I always remember the chairman, Douglas Craig, who was terrific to me, really supportive in everything I did. And it was two different ones. It was being the youth team coach at Chesterfield, basically on a shoestring, to going to York, where they had everything. And the club were more interested in the youth team than they were with the first team. So everything was set up for it. So I was, again, very fortunate to move into that role. But I only got that role because, obviously, at the time I played at York for the the 5 or 6 games are there, I must have made an impression on Douglas Craig, who was the chairman at the time. And then 6 years later, they brought us back as youth team coach. You know what I mean? And then like you say, so I was there for about a year and a half doing the youth team. Got to the 5th round of the FA Youth Cup, with and then we played West Ham, and took them to a replay. In a nutshell, West Ham beat Coventry 10-0 in the final. So it just shows at the time again we had young kids, but it was a scenario with West Ham and us with Middlesbrough. You only had one chance at it. Yeah. So we played West Ham at home at Bootham Crescent, and we drew 1-1. Should have won the game. We had the better chances, and there were Carrick, there was Cole. They had all these lads at the time, and then we took them to a replay. When you're talking about then, took them to a replay. The Joe Coles and the Michael Carricks turned up at that game, and it was men against boys. You know what I mean? Yeah. You only have one chance realistically at playing against that. And it's. But yeah, it was good times at York, and then I'm trying to think as I'm speaking to you. I think the manager got the sack. I think it was Alan Little. Alan Little got the sack, and then Neil Thompson took over. And Neil was their player manager, and great lad again, good player, really enthusiastic about the game, and that's why he's been in the game at that level, because he's at Sheffield Wednesday now, and he's been a caretaker manager a few times, but a good lad. But Tomo was still playing, so he asked us, would I like to move up? The actual chairman at York at the time said no. No, I want you to stay where you are. The future of our club is youth development, because that's how clubs survived, and he said, no, we need you to stay there. And he goes, but it's up to you. I'll support you what you did, which it's normally the other way around when the coach is trying to tell the chairman what to do. He was telling me what to do, and I just said, Chairman, look, I fancy I fancy the opportunity, and it's and I went up with Neil, and like I say, with Neil still playing, great learning curve again, because obviously he was playing, he could make all the decisions. By the time half time came, he was knackered anyway because he'd been playing. And things like that. But Neil was very supportive, and again learned a lot from himself. And it didn't surprise me, and it hasn't surprised me. 40 years later, he's still involved in the game at the highest level. Because of for that way. And then, Neil got the sack, and then Terry Dolan took over. So, and at the time, it was a case of didn't know Terry, and it was he ended up just came in, and the first week was interesting because we never spoke to each other. So we're in the same office and we never spoke, and it was so I because everybody was saying Terry was going to bring his own man in, and after, so I never forced the issue, and then after about a week, I just said to Terry, look, if I'm going, tell me, not a problem, if I'm not, tell me as well, and his words were, and I'll never forget, he said, I'm here to manage, you're here to be my assistant and coach. And he said, anyway, I can't sack you because the chairman won't let us. So I knew I was on a good thing then, to be fair. But then, Terry Dolan's become really one of my best friends, who again, he just missed out taking Bradford at a few years earlier to the Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And people, I think he got, when he was at Hull City, he got a lot of stake and abuse at Hull. But again, they were in financial meltdown, and he couldn't do anything about it. And then he went to Bradford, and like I say, I think he was one game. I'm trying to think of the team they played, but they were one game away from being in the Premier League. And then he ended up in these. But and again, another manager who learned so much from. Just slightly different. Terry was very quiet, just got on with the job, but very methodical in whatever he did. So I was always fortunate. I ended up, like I say, working with Terry, and then. And again, but unfortunately, like I say, we went into administration. We just missed out on the playoffs, and it was the time when really it was a sweet big blow. That Chesterfield should have been deducted a few more points than they should have been, and we would have went in the playoffs. And that was the time when I think they only got. I think Nicky Law was in charge at the time, and it was the Luke Beckett scenario, because we tried to sign Luke Beckett and then realised he had 2 contracts.
Oh yeah.
So it's. So unfortunately, our chairman, he didn't let that drop, and it carried on, and Chesterfield got the points deducted, but they didn't get what they probably should have done, or what we were expecting York at the time. But it was a sweet bit because I had my wife, who's a season ticket holder.
I was going to say, was that awkward?
It was a very awkward time in the household. I had obviously my connections with Chesterfield, which is second to none. That's why I'm still in the area and still contact people at the club. And it was very awkward because it was, personally, I wanted us to go up or be at least get in the playoffs. But yeah, it was a very difficult time at the time.
So being kind of around Chesterfield all this time, obviously it's been an interesting few years, decade.
Yeah.
And obviously with you being ingrained in that community work from when you finished playing, now it's kind of back again, but there was that spell in between where it all went a bit funny from kind of being on the outside but in the area. What have you kind of made of these last few years?
Interesting. I think, like everybody else, interesting. It's on the football side, we've always said in Chesterfield, which they are doing now, and Paul Cook's got the team going and playing really well. Which makes my life a lot easier because my wife comes back happy after games, so it makes my weekend a lot better. And but for them, a couple of years, where it was in and out, it was just sad times, wasn't it? It was sad times for not just the club, but for the community. And I think, without going into too much detail, because I don't really know the detail, when you've had a chairman who was involved in it, who people say he didn't put money in, but did he put money in? We don't know. As in Dave Allen, it's sometimes the grass is never greener. But I think the club and the supporters pulled together. And, you look at it now when you go there, and you think in the National League, and on average, it's 8,500. Now that's not just down to the way Paul Cook is playing, because Cookie sets his team up to play attractive football, and he'll score 4, but we might concede 3, but he doesn't set out to do that. But it's put bums on seats again, and I always look when I go to a club, like I do, just and see how many young kids are there who enjoy.
I was just going to say, I've never seen so many kids inside that ground.
And again, that's the future of the club, and that's where the community comes into it. These are your future fans. So come and support Chesterfield. I used to say to Norton Lee years ago, and we ended up trying to get a sponsorship with, we did eventually with Chesterfield Co-op, and we had the family stand, and it was just to try and buy, because every time I used to do my soccer schools at Chesterfield, nobody came to Chesterfield Top. It was always Sheffield Wednesday, Sheffield United, Liverpool, Man United. Nobody wore a Chesterfield top. Well, now you walk around town or wherever, and kids have got Chesterfield tops on, and they're proud to be Chesterfield, and that can only be good for the club, but also good for the community. You know what I mean? And it's I think it's very exciting times, and I don't want to say it because we're still it's not even Christmas yet, but I think I'll be very disappointed. Personally, if we don't go back up, and I see
looking promising.
I shouldn't use the word we, but I still do. We and it's so it'll be interesting to see where we finish. And I think, but if we carry on like we're doing, I just don't think there's a Wrexham, there's a Notts County around financially who can compete with us in this league. I went to a game a few weeks ago and I looked on the bench, and when you see Will Gregg, Cole Clough, and people that are on the bench, and you go, wow. And which tells you a story, and I think Cookies does what Cookie does well. He sort of gathers a squad which can compete at the highest level, and he's brought in great experienced players who have seen it and done it, and I think also like the Wrexhams in this world, the teams who normally come out the National League, they're that well organised and bringing good players that even let's hope this time next year when they're in the league, I think they'll be successful in that division as well.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Because I think the squad they've got, and I'm sure if they do go, Paul will be given a little bit more money to spend, and trust in Cookie, shall we say? Because he's done it before. I'm sure he'll do it again.
Great. So you're kind of EFL. You work for the EFL. Yeah. What was it? Youth development.
Yeah, I'm the regional manager in the youth development. So it's and the role in that on a day-to-day basis. I've got now sort of 8 clubs I look after. Basically, from Sunderland to Middlesbrough to Barnsley, Sheffield Wednesday to Grimsby. So I've got sort of them sort of clubs. So I've got a good mix of, we call them now, they're all graded into Cat 1s, 2s, 3s and 4s. The Cat 1s are mainly your Premier League clubs, but also in that is the FL, like Sunderland and Middlesbrough. And then you've got your Barnsleys and your Sheffield Wednesdays who are Cat 2s. Then this time next year, you might have Chesterfield who are a Cat 3 or a Cat 4 if they come into the programme. You know what I mean? So my job on a day basis is going in to support them clubs. We've got a process to go through because every club now gets grant aid funding from the Premier League and ourselves, and they've got to comply with the rules and regulations. So they've got to be compliant and safe to operate. So my job on a day-to-day basis is checking them, going in. So I speak to, at the time, I'm fortunate that the clubs I've got. I speak to the managers, and then I'll also speak to the under-9 coach. And our role really over a 3-year period, because everybody gets audited by an independent audit, and which will dictate then if they get the funding or not. So we're there to support them to get them through the audit, and then just to basically support them and making sure that they're trying to deliver what they say they're doing, which most of the clubs are doing, to be fair. But it was a stopgap because obviously when I came back from St Vincent, and then I went down with Danny Wilson at Milton Keynes, I took this job just as a stopgap because I wanted to get back into coaching and managing. Here I am 18 years later, which is a job.
Happens.
It does, and it's one of these where I've, at the time when I first started, I had 17 clubs I looked after. And which was, and it was, like I said to you earlier on, it was mainly down to the southwest. So I was traveling to Brighton, Torquay, Plymouth, Swansea, Cardiff. So it was a lot of time on the road. It wasn't like it is now, where people have got to make sure that they tick every box and be compliant and safe to operate. But it was interesting. But I love the job. I love the job because I'm fortunate I can get into. I've got 8 clubs. I go into 8 clubs within every 2 weeks, see different people. I still get me buzzed by watching the coaches coach. I get me buzzed by speaking to some of the younger coaches who probably, want a little bit of advice or ask for the advice. And but the job entails really not just the coaching side. It goes from basically the coaching side to the medical side to the recruitment side. And then we even to the board level, leadership and management. Does the club actually believe in the academy? Again, I've seen it probably both ways. One at York City where yes, the other way at Chesterfield where it was very difficult all the time because it was the support probably wasn't there all the time. But so it's great. Love the job. Like you say, being in an 18 year, and it's because it gives us something different every day. It gives us something different. Again, there's times when we have issues that we need to sort out, which becomes quite difficult for some reasons because certain clubs, their grant aid funding is, it could be 800 grand. So they've got to make sure that they comply with the rules because if they don't, they'll lose that. They'll lose that. But no, it's a really enjoyable job. It gets us out.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, to kind of finish off, because I know I've taken up loads of your time, but I always have a little YouTube search and stuff if whenever I'm looking, see if I can see some clips, and you did score. You scored 3 goals for Chesterfield, I think. I think there was maybe a cup one as well, but I think it was 3 league goals. I think it was Southend, Wrexham, and you also scored against Bristol Rovers. I think it was.
I did, yes.
And Nigel Martin was in net then.
It was, yeah.
And that video is on YouTube.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, so I saw it on YouTube. You got proper clonked by Nigel Martin when you stabbed it home.
Well, I still believe it was Bob Bloomer's fault because I think the ball that he put in the box wasn't proper. You know what I mean? But we have a laugh about it. But it was an interesting one, and I haven't seen it, to be fair. I haven't seen
the link.
So I'll try and have a look at it. But I can't remember. I remember going in for the ball, and again, like I've said, I shouldn't have probably went in for it, but because the player was, it was, and probably that's why I had to retire with knee injuries because I went into tackles, which probably I shouldn't have done. But unfortunately, this time I remember just trying to make a run, tried to lob it over him. I think he just come out and all together, and I can't really remember much about it until I woke up in the hospital, and it was about 8, 9 o'clock, and the lads were still in the car park because the chairman wouldn't pay for us to get a taxi back home. So he waited to back, and so you can imagine the game finished at 5 o'clock or 4:45, which they all did then. And I think we were still in the car park because I think they played at Bath then, Bristol Rovers. I think they played down in Bath. And so I think I wasn't too popular when I got on the team coach, and they were about 4 hours late from leaving Bristol Hospital or Bath Hospital at the time. But no, it was I think I scored more own goals, David, than I did actual goals. You know,
it was one of those clips where I watched it and I was like, oh, there's a goal, and I watched it and I went, oof. Because Nigel Martin's not a small chap, is he? So I imagine he leaves his mark.
Well, he wasn't there. Yeah, he wasn't there. But no, like I said, I've never seen the clip, and I can't remember too much about it. It was one of these, and it's when you look back now, and we look at how many concussions and what happens to play. I think I played the Tuesday. I was still being sick on Monday morning with concussion, but I played on the Tuesday. And rightly or wrongly, but I wanted to play on the Tuesday. I thought I could play on the Tuesday, but I probably would have had 2 weeks off now. Because they're not allowed to with the concussion protocols. You're not allowed to basically play straight away. You know what I mean? So, but no. But my career, like I say, I was with Danny Wilson as well down at Milton Keynes, which is interesting. And I went back down there last Thursday to do some work down at Milton Keynes and to see the stadium they've got. And then, like I say, to finish off with, went over to St Vincent and took them through the World Cup qualifiers, which was terrific, and again, good experience. Looking at the weather today, I wish I was back out there.
I was going to say, I bet that was nice, wasn't it? How much time did you actually get to spend?
Yeah, to be fair, I was out there for officially contract-wise for I think it was about 13, 14 months, but I'd went out a month before that just to see if I wanted to do it. So it was about 15 months I think altogether. But it was a tremendous adventure, shall we say? That's the word because you went out there and we were preparing for the World Cup. And we, in our group was Mexico, Trinidad, and St Kitts it was, and but really good times. And once I had all me full-time lads, because I had lads who played for LA Galaxy, Benfica, they were all over the world really. But my job on the day-to-day basis is virtually what we've just been talking about, developing the local lads on the island. So on my day-to-day basis, it was like for 2-3 days a week, I would coach basically what you would call the reserve sides, But I went out there with a guy called Cesc Pod, who used to play for Bradford City, and we went out there with an idea of let's set this up as an academy in England. So we started again. Probably that's why Cesc, because I played with Cesc at Halifax, so that was the connection. And like I say, we went out there and we looked after the national side, the men's main side, but then started trying to develop the women's football, which again, I'm still in contact with people out there. They've got like the under 16s, under 17s, now under 18s, and it's because now they're getting the funding that they're getting, which we should have had years ago, but unfortunately we weren't, from a certain person, which I can't go into too much detail about. But he was vice president of FIFA at the time, and I think one of the reasons I was relieved of my duties because I think at the time he was a very popular person in the Caribbean. I don't know why, because Trinidad were building big new stadiums, and places like ourselves and St Vincent and Barbados and St Lucian, St Kitts, we were still playing on and sharing the cricket stadium. And it's but yeah, looking at what they're doing now, I'm very proud of, again, the year I was out there. When I look back, I think we took them up from 150 in the FIFA rankings to about 102. So we did well, and it's and we did well.
So to kind of wrap up then, so since being a young kid at Roker Park, watching a match, you've kind of gone through, Brian Clough and getting plonked by Nigel Martin and having to retire early, and then doing community work and coaching and managing and doing youth development and all these other things. Are you still as passionate about the sport as you were when you were a little kid watching it in the stand? How's it all changed for you over the years?
Well, it's funny how you've just mentioned what you've just done in about 20 seconds there. I think you sometimes just forget what you've done. But it's probably, as you've seen and gathered on, the chat we've just had. I'm a passionate person. I'm still passionate about football. I'm passionate about people. Again, we look at it and say, well, not everybody's going to be a professional footballer, but can football make you a better person by being disciplined, by being courteous, and things like that. But it's been one hell of a journey. But it's a journey that I would never swap. And I still believe looking up, I think this is my 41st year, and I've been fortunate. I've stayed in it most of it all the time, really, and it's something I wouldn't swap. I've had it up and down. Do I see it as a job? No, because it's something. It's a hobby. It's my job. Some of my friends sometimes, when we go and have a beer or whatever, they'll talk about football. And then one of them a few weeks ago said, "Bloody hell, I bet you're sick about talking about football, lady, aren't you?" I said, "Well, no, because it's my hobby as well. So unfortunately, it's my job, but it's my hobby." You know what I mean? And it's been one great journey. I thoroughly enjoyed it and met some fantastic people. And I've worked with clubs. I haven't had a lot of clubs, but I've worked with clubs when I was playing and coaching. And as you can see, I've always been probably a loyal person. Chesterfield, I was there for a lot of years. York City, a lot of years. The Milton Keynes and St Vincent, not too long. But then I've been loyal to the EFL. Again, they've looked after me. But I would like to think I've worked hard for them, and that's who I am. I'll try and help anybody as much as I can, and that's where it is. But yeah, great journey, great experience. Wouldn't change it, and still going forward and being positive.
On the hour, a Chesterfield free kick silenced the crowd as Adie Shaw slipped through the Rovers' defence almost unnoticed. 2-1, half an hour to go.
I actually got engaged to my wife on the centre spot at Wembley as well. I was very fortunate there because we in the Carling Cup. That's our trophy, and I primed it with one of the guys there. So I took it down early doors on a Saturday morning. I said, "Come on, we'll go to Wembley and have a look at the ground." And the game was on the Saturday, and then took her out on the pitch. And typical woman who's very football passionate about football. When I said, "Come on, we'll walk on the pitch," she's gone, "I'm not going on there. That's Wembley. I can't walk on that turf." And so I obviously tried to drag her. And then we got to the middle of the pitch and looked around, and she looked around, and I just went down on one knee. And typical, she said, "What the hell are you doing down there? Have you fallen down?"